and welcome to the Westborough Planning Board meeting of January 18th. Before we begin, I will read the governor's order into the record. The Westborough Planning Board will hold a virtual meeting via Zoom on Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner via Zoom by the following link. Members of the public wishing to participate from the remote location are encouraged to email their questions to planning@town.westborough.ma.us. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and public participation in any public hearing conducted during this meeting shall be by remote means only. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 24 and Charter Channel 191, or live streamed online at westboroughtv.org. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. We have a full agenda tonight. We have to approve an engineering peer review for 9 Otis Street. We have to approve an amendment to 64 Otis Street site plan peer review. We have a discussion on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, discussion on the Town Planner Reporting Authority, discussion on zoning bylaw amendments for town meeting, and finally a discussion of the Housing Choice Act. I'd like to start with the 2 peer reviews. Jim Robbins, why don't you start with 9 Otis and just give us a quick summary of that, and we can turn to the board for questions. Jim,
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we are receiving a new site plan review for a landscape firm that is expanding at 9 Otis Street. They're going to be bringing landscape products and landscape machinery, constructing a new building to house their machinery in their offices, as well as to take an additional commercial tenant adjacent inside the same building. The peer review is for the site engineering of the site plan, which means drainage, utilities, access, etc. And we've requested a proposal with a scope of services and contract from Ty and Bond to conduct this work. I know you all received a copy of that scope and contract. The law requires that the planning board approve the peer review prior to any money being spent. Also, the applicant themselves must review and approve the peer review, as they are the ones that are paying for it. I have spoken with the folks at 9 Otis Street. They did review it. We received an executed copy of their portion of the contract today. And I now ask that the planning board please approve the scope of services and the contract amount not to exceed $10,000.
Okay. Any questions from the board on that?
I assume the plan is sufficient, going to cover everything that needs to be covered.
The scope of services was reviewed by our town engineer and discussed with the peer reviewer, Ty and Bond.
For what we know, so what we know now, yes, we believe so. I mean, there's always some unknowns. So if they discover anything that's, you know, of large scale, or if it ends up more like a larger project that we run into lots of revisions, if their engineer doesn't necessarily resolve all our questions right away, there's always that chance. But this is a fairly small site, and I think it should be more than enough.
So I think that's one of the purposes of the review is to make sure that their plans are sufficient and complete. Correct. Right? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Lisa, I just had that one point on the scope of services that they only refer to a virtual meeting, and I'm not sure how long we'll be doing virtual meetings. So in case we are not doing virtual meetings, I would expect them to attend a in-person meeting, as part of the scope. So I don't know if they can, I don't know that they need to alter it, but If you could just communicate that to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, can somebody have a draft motion or is ready to make a motion on this?
I can make it, Mark.
Thanks.
Let's
Go
see.
ahead.
This is on 9, yes. I move that the planning board approve the scope of services and contract for the engineering peer review for 9 Otis Street as outlined in the proposal referenced as engineering peer review services, site plan review applications 9 Otis Street from Ty and Bond dated January 6, 2022.
I second that.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, I have to do a roll call vote. So Hazel Nurse,
Yes, to approve.
Jim Ball,
Yes, Mark.
Tim Kaler,
Taylor, yes.
Pete Bouchard,
Bouchard, yes.
and I will vote yes as well. That's 5-0 in favor of approval. Next item on the agenda is approve an amendment to the 64 Otis Street site plan review. Again, I'll turn to Jim Robbins for just a quick summary of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we have approved a site plan for 64 Otis Street. One of the requirements was that they would satisfy all the peer review comments and requests for changes to the plans. There have been 3 reviews. The original scope of services and contract allowed for 2 reviews. There needs to be an amendment to the contract, the existing contract. They're calling it amendment number 1. The amount is $3,000. I would please request that you approve this amendment. The applicant, Atlantic Management, has already approved the amendment.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a draft or a motion ready?
Yeah, I
Jim, do you
can
want to
read
do
it.
it? Thanks. Go ahead.
I move that the planning board approve an amendment to the scope of services and contract for the engineering peer review for 64 Otis Street as outlined in the proposal referenced as, quote, engineering peer review services, amendment 1, comma, site plan review application 64 Otis Street, close quote, from Teagan Bonds dated January the 12th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, any discussion of the motion? All right, all those in favor, Hazel Nurse,
Yes, to approve.
Tim Kaler,
Yes, Kaler, yes.
Pete Bouchard,
Bouchard, yes.
Jim Ball,
Yes, Mark.
and I vote yes as well. That's 5-0 in favor of approval. I think next we will take up the release of Escrow on 66 Otis Street, Jim, if that's all right. We'll get that out of the way.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. So as you know, the planning board requires an escrow deposit of $2,000 with every special permit. The use at 66 Otis Street, which is Cold Harbor Brewing, was approved for a site plan and special permit back in early December. The consulting escrow fee was not used. We handled the review in-house, done by the engineering department. There was no need for a traffic study. So the entire amount of $2,000 is still on deposit with the town unused. They have requested in writing a return of that amount. That is standard procedure. The planning board must vote to release that escrow. You have a draft motion.
Is anybody ready to make that motion?
I've got it here, Mark.
Thanks.
I move that the planning board release for refund the remaining escrow fee collected for the site plan review application for 66 Otis Street, Cold Harbor Brewing.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a roll call again. Tim Kaler,
Kaler, yes.
Pete Bouchard,
Bouchard, yes.
Jim Ball,
Ball, yes.
Hazel Nurse,
Yes, to approve.
and I vote yes to approve as well. That's 5-0 in favor of that motion. All right, next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the Master Plan Implementation Committee. We received a summary on this from Jim, but I'll ask him to kind of go through that again for us. for the benefit of the public.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may recall from your last meeting, we talked about getting a scope of services and a cost estimate from our former consultant VHB on master plan implementation. That was the process that was administered by the town of Northborough. That was their recommendation. So I have reached out to VHB. Kristen has asked Donnie Goris-Kobe, who was the lead on the project for the town, to please prepare a scope of services and a fee schedule. We've asked them to provide both an hourly and a meeting schedule, as well as a scope for what they think to be an entire implementation plan. This is not a process where the consultant would stick with us for years. It's a process where the consultant basically gets us going, helps us to run the process and prioritize the goals from the plan that the town accepted. And it's not intended to be a scope that would stay with us for more than a year, probably 6 to 8 months. So I think that when we get that scope, which was promised to us for either the first meeting in February or the second, which would be either February 1st or February 8th, you'll have a chance to review that and decide how you want to proceed. As you know, there's no additional money in the master plan account, so we would either have to do a recurring services contract or go to town meeting to get an appropriation to fund the implementation.
Kristen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to correct the dates that Donnie thought he'd be able to get the information to us would be the beginning of the week of the 7th. So then you'd have that week to review it. And then for the February 18th meeting is his goal.
Thank you.
Does that
Well,
give us enough time if we have to go to the town meeting to get finances for it?
I believe the warrant closes February 28th. February 26th.
Okay, so that would give us sufficient time if we needed funds.
Yes, but the selectmen would want a heads up on that sooner rather than later. So the soonest that we get it, we should discuss it on the 8th so that I can get it on the warrant if we choose to not go that way.
Is there another way to go?
Well, let's see what they propose first.
Okay, any other questions on that?
I just have one other thing. We're not required to put this out to bid.
It depends on the amount and how we structure if we pay them per meeting as opposed to, and it may be a recurring services contract, and then we might not have to put it out to bid.
Okay.
If it's
We have
over
to see.
$10,000, we would.
Yeah, we have to see what the proposal is. If it's,
Right.
3 meetings for less than 10,000 or 5, I'm hoping they're not going to charge us 2,000 a meeting.
Right. Okay. I just would prefer, if at all possible, to streamline this. So if it didn't have to go out for bids, I would like to go that direction.
I agree with Hazel.
So I think we asked them for some, kind of several different proposals to see, whether we could maybe work with them for a few meetings and then see if we needed to continue with them or continue without them. And then we can judge that at that time. So we'll have to see what they come back with for a proposal and cost. I'm more actually concerned, and I don't want to get too into the makeup of the committee now, but I just encourage you all to think about representation. Jim is proposing, I think the proposal that we got was something like 17 members of this committee, and I'm not sure how I feel about that yet, as whether that's too many. But I do believe, adequate representation is important. So I don't necessarily want to spend an hour on that discussion now, but I'd like to think about it so that when we're ready to form the committee, we've had a chance to to think about that.
In the memo that I sent you, I listed just the personnel or the people, staff and committees that were used by Northborough and discussed by the consultant. These are not necessarily my recommendations. It's
Okay.
just a list of people that were identified and departments that were identified for discussion, that's all.
Okay. I'd also like to just, form this committee after the election so we can put Jim Ball on as a member of the public.
I'm going to be super busy that month, a year or two.
All right, Jim. We'll see. I think it's important to get some new faces on this committee too. I think that would be good. So anyway, any further discussion of that or questions about the implementation process? All right. Why don't we move on then to the Town Planner Reporting Authority? Last meeting, I feel like we had some discussion about, I think the only real open, I don't want to say the only real open question, but the biggest remaining question is whether the town planner would report directly to the community development director or whether they would report to the town manager. I'd like to get this resolved and report back to the town manager and select board so that they know our preference on that. So anybody want to take that up?
Yeah, Kristen, can you possibly put that warrant article up? Because there seemed to have been a change when I read the warrant article, which has no mention whatsoever of the town planner reporting to anybody. All it says is that the building department, the building commissioner, it's Article 18. All it says is that the community development director supervises the building commissioner, conservation director, and economic development coordinator. But that's all it says. So this discussion.
I don't know. I think that, did
reporting-
that come from Christie?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing
I don't
that.
think I have a copy of that.
Uh,
I'll look
Can I
through my files.
This was dated January 12th.
Is it the second draft?
I don't know, I have to tell you. I just have it, when I printed it out. Yes, it's version 2,
All right.
January
Can
12th, 2022.
Can I share my screen then?
Sure.
All right. Let
Yeah,
me
you
see
should be able to.
if I can do this properly. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Yes, Mark.
Right. I believe this is the one you're referring to, Hazel. And so the
let's see
Planning
what that's,
board.
yeah,
So
okay,
the
let's see what we
changes
got
are,
here.
the changes, the deleted changes are in green. The purple changes. So if you can see the appointments, the first draft said community development director shall appoint. This draft says the town manager shall appoint, but it doesn't seem to say who.
The town planner with the concurrence of the planning board.
Oh, yes, there it is. Okay, sorry, that's
You guys were open till 7.
right. And then I think you're referring to
I violated parking.
the community development department director is
Mr. Chairman,
responsible.
could you have,
Go
I
ahead.
can't hear, there's background noise coming somewhere.
Yeah. Kristen, are you muted? I think she just muted Tim.
I think she did.
Okay. So I think the paragraph you're referring to, Hazel, is Article 5-1, paragraph 2. The
Yeah.
community development director is responsible for overseeing and coordinating the town's development activities in cooperation with the town planner,
And
and the planning board. The community development
Okay.
director supervises the building commissioner, conservation director, and economic development coordinator, or other such title as may be given to the heads of these departments, and may also perform the functions of the heads of these departments or town planner. So
Okay.
essentially, this allows the planner or the building commissioner to become the community development director.
Yeah, but the thing is, what doesn't make sense to me, and every time I read this, I have the same feeling about it. If you go back to that, is I don't understand how the community development director could perform the functions of the building commissioner or the heads of the other departments when they have no training. So I don't understand why that sentence is in there.
No, it's not intended for them. Obviously, our current community development director is performing dual roles already, Hazel. He's
No, I
building
know
I don't
commissioner.
know why.
So I think the point is that the department's not big enough to support a separate community development director position. And so until that department grows to add a whole nother position, somebody has to do double duty. And it
Yeah,
would
but
either
that-
be the town planner or the building commissioner.
But that's not what it says. I mean, the thing is that's what I don't understand, is that it makes absolutely no sense to put something in that says that the economic development director can perform the functions of the heads of all the departments. I mean, that makes no sense to me. So I can't understand why that sentence is in there.
Hazel, could you clarify where it says the economic development director is performing all the functions?
It's on Article 5.1. It's right on the screen now. It says the economic development coordinator.
No, the
Or other
community
such-
development, so the community development director supervises the building commissioner, conservation director, and economic development coordinator.
And it struck the town planner, and it shouldn't have. As I said last time, Mr. Chairman, we need an unedited copy to review. How are we supposed to comment on this with red lines and strikeouts?
Okay.
I thought we
so-
were going to see the descriptions of the general bylaw amendments around which we're asked to provide a recommendation in terms of a vote.
Okay,
And to come to this meeting again, we're right back in the same discussion we had the last time. The town manager clarified that they would, in this draft, maintain appointing authority, but that reporting authority for the town planner position would be to the community development director. And that's what I thought Article 5.1 was supposed to say, in addition to the fact that the building commissioner and the town planner were the unique roles that could serve in the community development director position, should that ever be so desired. And
right.
they
So I
further
think that,
clarified that it was a budgetary problem. There wasn't budget to staff a community development director and a building commissioner separately. And so they made the organizational change. That was my recollection of the last discussion. But
right, Tim, I think that
we need to be looking at a final version that the select board wants to approve.
Okay,
I think,
So-
isn't that fair?
yeah, Tim, I agree with you, but there's still an outstanding issue, and you seem of the mind that the town planner should report to the community development director, and Hazel seems to be of the mind that the town planner should report directly to the town manager. And that's the issue that we need to resolve before we can get final language.
I know of no proposal to have the town planner report to the town manager, and I thought we talked that through last time, but that's
Well,
not
here
a
that's
proposal
reflected
made by the
because
select board.
well, this proposal takes town planner out from under community development director as it's been struck. So that would assume that reports to the town manager. But
I share Hazel's confusion about how we even interpret a document like this, where there's so many red lines and strikeouts, but we're back to the same discussion we had. I know of no proposal by the select board or anybody else to have the town planner report to, not be appointed by, but report to the town manager. And
Well, I must be missing something then, Tim, because that question has been up in the air ever since Lester came in and proposed it. And I don't think it's ever been resolved. You had made the point last meeting that you preferred to have them report to the community development director because scope of command or whatever the phrase was.
yeah,
you
I beg your
used.
pardon. It's not my proposal or my feeling or my
I didn't say it was your
preference.
proposal. I
It's
said
what-
that it was your preference.
It's what is on the table by the select board or the town manager, whoever's proposing these bylaw amendments. What is it that they're proposing? And if we're proposing something different by process of discussion, then so be it.
Well, so again, this is the second draft, Tim. We were given a first draft where it was written with, the to the effect that the town planner reported to the community development director. And we were, after one of our meetings, we were basically went back to them and asked them to rewrite it so that the town planner reported to the town manager. So I don't necessarily blame the board, the select board or the town manager for this. I think we need to decide as a planning board what we want them to bring back to us. Again, I think the biggest issue left is whether the town planner reports directly to the town manager or directly to the community development director.
Well, I would just suggest that the second paragraph or second sentence in the second paragraph, where the community development director supervises the building commissioner, conservation director, and then from then on, I don't know what we're saying. If what we're saying is the town planner reports to the town manager, I don't see any language in here that suggests that. In the first page, it suggests that the town manager have appointing authority with the planning board. But in terms of reporting authority, I don't see where it's spelled out here. Maybe you can point that out to me.
Tim, I think it's implied by striking it under the sentence where it previously was reporting to the community development director, but it is not specifically stated. I agree with you. So I think it was struck from being included under those reporting to the community development director, which would imply the town manager, but I think it should say that. That's why it was struck after our prior conversation, but I think it should specifically state the reporting function.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Tim. If you
That's
look
what
at
I
the
thought
section,
we'd done.
if you look at the section we're reviewing now, they actually struck the town planner shall report directly to the town manager, and that should have been put back in.
Right.
So we need to address that.
All right, my other question though, also when I go down to that, if you go down to that next page again, if you just scroll down for me, okay. It makes, as I said, it makes absolutely no sense to me that the economic coordinator development can perform the functions of the heads of the other departments or the town planner. I mean, that should not be in there. It should be, I don't understand why it's there.
Well, I don't understand the confusion, Hazel, because they have to have a mechanism by where the community development director can also be one of those positions, or else we have to create a whole new position and fund a whole new position above those other positions. And I don't think the town's ready to do that.
Yeah,
Hazel, I think it's poorly written, Hazel. That's what that means. It means that person can be one and the same with one of those other department heads.
That's right, but that's
I think it's just poorly written.
And that's not what it says at all. I mean, essentially what it's backwards is what it says. So it's the poorly written. That's the point.
It's poorly written. That's what it means.
Makes no sense.
All right. So I'm actually in agreement with Tim. We really do need a final draft on this and not a bunch of red lines.
And we also need, with due respect, we need the advocate if that's someone from the select board or the town manager to explain what the proposal, my understanding, yeah, I'm not going to argue for it because it sounds like I'm advocating for it. But my understanding of this whole change was having to do with the organizational change that took place a couple of years ago to put these other positions under the community development director. It is meant in part to flatten the management structure, and it's meant to streamline operations and prevent siloing. But there's nobody arguing for the benefits, and there's no, I've heard no argument to have the town planner report to the town manager. So we split it off and had appointment authority. So I think we need a clean draft that's supported by whoever's advocating for this change.
Okay, so why don't I go back to the town manager and ask her to clean this up and get us a final draft and attend our next meeting. And we'll circulate that final draft ahead of time so that everybody has a chance to read it, and hopefully we can even ask some questions ahead of time, so we're not spending an entire meeting hashing out grammar.
Well said. Yeah, it ought to make clear where the reporting authority is for the town planner.
Yeah, if we get this rewritten and out to everybody a week ahead of time, everybody should have a chance to review it and reply to either to me or directly to the town manager with their suggestions or questions or changes, and get those answered, and so that the advocate, as Tim says, is ready to address those at our next meeting. I really don't feel like, I feel like we have an incomplete document at this point.
All right, Mark, just one thing. I think the other thing to look at this is it's sort of an after the fact kind of thing. In other words, the town already did something and now they're trying to put it into the bylaws without kind of, I think, thinking it through, because the whole point of this originally was to set up a community development director, which would be a separate position. And this is what I assume down the road the town is planning to do, is to have this as a separate position, because it makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for any of these department heads, I don't care who they are, to be holding two positions, because there are too many things going on in this town. So my point is that if we make this change now, I can see us having to make another change further down the road. So somebody ought to think about the fact that once we've made this change in the general bylaws, it should be looking forward as to, when we get a community development director, that's going to be a separate position, because that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, so I think the original bylaw proposal that came to us was structured so that the charter wouldn't have to be changed again. And if we change the language so that the town planner reports directly to the town manager, well, if the department grows to the extent where the community development director is a distinct position, then the charter would have to change again, because at that point, it would make sense for the town planner to report directly to a community development director.
Not necessarily.
Well,
that's something
that's not something that's,
right.
That's something that the town would have to decide what makes sense.
Right.
But we would have to make a recommendation on that if we're still on the board. Right. All right. Either way, I feel like we're kind of spinning our wheels on this, because we need, I agree with Tim's point. We need a final document that we can address, and this one is just not really ready for us to look at.
I mean, I think, Mark, the changes that you originally made, that you sent a draft around, I thought that covered it. I mean, I thought that the changes you made sense to me.
All right. Well, I could bring that up, but I feel like, at this point, I want to go back to, I just want to go back to the town manager, and I'll work with her to get to try and get this language finalized. And when I say finalized, at least to a point where we don't have to look at a document that's got a bunch of red lines and crosses out, and it's just hard to read in this format. So let's work on that, right? Then, because I really want to get this wrapped up and get some kind of recommendation back to the select board. I feel like we're just going around and around on the same questions.
Okay, I just want to add, this is a major decision. It's just, we have an incomplete document. I just don't feel like at any of our meetings that we should be reviewing something that's in this incomplete format, just based on, we've wasted we've wasted some time on this at this point. So I think going forward, we need to make sure that any discussion, we have a finalized document, so we all have a understanding of what's going on, because it seems like there's just not a complete understanding. That's all.
And also that we don't get stuff at the last minute.
Agreed.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I think the intent of including the changes, I understand the intent, but when it gets to be too many, then it gets, or if you want to include one copy that has the changes, but with a final document, then maybe that's okay. So it's just gotten to be too many.
I agree.
But I understand the intent of reflecting them.
Well, I mean, I think that's a completely accurate analysis, because I tried to read it and I had trouble picking out which words were still part of the paragraph and which ones weren't. And I think that makes it difficult for us to grasp the actual impact when we're trying to figure out gritty on the language. So
yeah, particularly the other thing is I just like to raise the fact that that the in the town warrant, if you look at it, it's already been written in there without even our input. It just, it appeared in the second draft of the town warrant, and I don't feel that's right. I mean, I think that anything that goes to the town warrant like that should have been vetted by the planning board. And not
the warrant isn't finalized, Hazel.
No, but I know, but it's been published to the public, and that's, whatever it is that's public out there, that concerns me, because I think that we should have been consulted a long time ago before this even got in this sort of a draft thing where it keeps coming out. So I just like to raise that because I don't like the process.
Okay. I think we were consulted a long time ago, so we just haven't really gotten the answers we need. So I'd like to get those and put this whole issue to bed, in the sense that if we're going to support some kind of change, what is that change going to be? All right, any further comments, questions on that?
No.
All right, I'll communicate directly to Christie on that to see if we can get some final language circulated by early next week. All right, next item on the agenda then is a discussion on the zoning bylaw amendments for town meeting. Jim Robbins, I'm going to turn to you to take us through. I know we have one draft bylaw already. And then I don't know if you want to discuss the other proposed bylaw amendments that we don't have language on yet.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm only going to discuss the sign bylaw. I sent out the proposed bylaw for new industrial E district to the zoning review committee. When I hear back from them, probably in the next day or two, I will send it out to you. We're looking to discuss both this and the industrial E bylaw at our next meeting, with a public hearing coming in February, our second meeting in February. So the draft you have in front of you right now is just a draft. And it is the outcome of 5 or 6 meetings of the zoning review committee. Jim Ball is a member of that. He can jump in at any time. What we wanted to do was to respond to the proponent of this, who, as you know, was Clear Channel in combination with Caruth Capital. They drafted what I call a very draft bylaw that was submitted to us and was referred back to committee at town meeting after being placed on the warrant. And what you see here is a much more fully developed bylaw, where electronic billboards would be allowed on properties that front on or directly abut 495 and the Mass Pike, nowhere else. And the intention of this is to allow them only within 1,000 feet of each other and only in combination with the state guidelines that govern the permitting of signage along those interstate highways. You'll note that in there we've made consideration for the content and quality of advertising, requiring public service announcements and an agreement with the Board of Selectmen, which we call a development agreement between the Selectmen and Clear Channel and the applicant for the sign. There'd be certain provisions that the applicant would have to meet, size of sign, height of sign, intensity of the sign's electronic output, as well as the quality of what can be advertised. There's a restriction on advertising adult entertainment as defined in our local zoning bylaw. There's a restriction on advertising marijuana, whether it's medical or recreational, as defined in our local zoning bylaw. There's some question as to whether or not that would relate only to companies that might be located in Westborough, or how that would affect companies outside of Westborough wishing to advertise on the interstate highway. This has been sent to town council. Council has it. He's corresponded with me today just to make sure that he has the correct draft. He'll have comments back to us, I hope, in the very near future before our next meeting. I'll be requesting that so we can see what council thinks about this. One point of note is that the bylaw currently is drafted so that the Zoning Board of Appeals is the permitting authority, not the planning board. And the reason for that is, Justin Lundberg, the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, is a member of our zoning review committee. And he thought that the best way to handle this would be to strictly interpret the bylaw as written, and that the Zoning Board of Appeals is the best place for that, because they don't look at intent, they only look at what's written. And I think that's advantageous to the planning board if you wish restrictions on the quality and the content of what's advertised. I don't know if Jim
Okay.
has any further explanation, and I know Fred Renato is on this call as well, in case he wants to add anything.
That was actually one of my questions, Jim, so I'm glad you addressed it. Jim, Paul, or Fred, do you have any comments?
I think probably, and maybe we've mentioned this before, but we did do a public survey, which had a lot of comments back. And we took those comments into consideration in developing this. Reviewed, Justin was able to pull up several other communities, and one in particular that had done this thought quite well. And so, we spent a lot of time on this, I guess is what I want to say, and got a lot of input from a lot of people in a lot of towns. And I think it's a lot better than it was before. Otherwise, I think Jim summed it up well.
Okay. Any other question? Fred, did you have a comment? Go ahead.
No, I just, thank you, Mark. I would just echo what Jim said. I think it was well thought out. I think it's well written. I don't really see any problems interpreting it. I think it's pretty straightforward. It addresses some of the concerns that Hazel and other members of the board and other public spoke about. So I think it does all that.
One other comment, Mark. My recollection was we initially had 200 feet from residential, and we increased that to 500. So I don't know if people noticed that, but that was a change that we thought was important.
I agree with that.
Thank you, Jim. And just so you know, that's from a residential use, not a residential district.
Yes.
So for example, on Flanders Road, you have residential uses in industrially zoned districts. And the intention is to protect residential properties.
I think that was well thought out, that section. So any other questions on this? I have a couple, but I wanted to give other people a chance. Okay, I'll just go to mine then.
I had some questions.
Oh, go ahead, Hazel.
Listen, all right. I read this through and I think I'm waiting to see what the town attorney says because I had a number of questions about this and I felt that there are conflicts the way it's written. But I will wait until I see what the town attorney says about this. One of my concerns is a couple of things. The way this is written, it says that any content on there is for public good, or for the benefit of Westborough. Does this mean that we are going to allow other communities to advertise on this board?
So when you say other communities, I don't think there's going to be, say, one of our abutting communities advertising of this board. There might be something like an Amber Alert or a Red Alert from the local police departments or from the state police department. But when you say other communities, you mean other businesses in other communities.
Yeah.
And I believe that is the case. If you look at the billboards on Route 9, other businesses outside of Westborough advertise on those.
Right, but the way this is written, because my feeling is there is a conflict there on that. And I also have been looking at this practically. All right, I think one of the things that we really need to look at is where we could put these billboards, because if you think of the stretch, there's only one place, my understanding is, that this billboard could be put on 495.
That's not correct.
There's more than one.
Jim, go
It's
ahead,
possible.
answer that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have, oh, go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Jim. Please.
The size of some of the properties that are on Flanders Road, which also abut the 495 stretch, are long enough that 1,000 feet could possibly create multiple billboards on alternate sides of 495. So the way this is written is that you can't have a billboard that faces, you can't have two billboards within 1,000 feet of each other. And that includes opposite sides of the roads. But there's one property that has over 1,300 feet of frontage along 495. So they certainly could get one billboard on their property. All they need is another 700 feet up the road to have another billboard. So you have a stretch of several miles along 495 that are in Westborough. So the opportunity for more than one billboard is a very real possibility. And what restricts the number of billboards is the location of residential properties on Washington Street and on Flanders Road. So you may have the linear distance to have multiple billboards, but the interspersement of residential uses within that corridor may restrict the number of billboards. Although I think you're still going to get at least more than one.
Do you think there's going to be more than one billboard that's going to be able to be put on that stretch of 495?
It has the linear length, yes.
And so the intent then also is to allow businesses from other communities to put their advertising on there?
I don't know how we'd restrict that, to say only Westborough businesses could be advertised. I'm not saying you couldn't, but.
No, but the way it's written, it could be interpreted.
Oh, okay.
That way.
Can you point that out to me, Hazel, just so that I understand?
It says, where is it? It's on the has to do.
Mark, do you want to stop sharing your screen and I can
Oh,
put it up on the
so
screen?
sorry about that, guys. I forgot I was doing that.
That's right. It's where it's the agreement between the select board, where it says off-premises billboard sign should be permitted if the select board determines the billboard sign serves to provide a public benefit to the town of Westborough.
But that doesn't have anything to do with the content, Hazel. That would, for instance, be the fact that we're allowing messaging for the town, messaging for activities in town, the fact that there's revenue to the town. That doesn't mean it doesn't allow other content. It simply means that it has to serve a benefit to the town. So you know how the existing signs have public messaging about events or emergencies or things like that. It doesn't mean it only does that.
All right, all I'm saying is that I think there's a lot of ambiguity in this particular bylaw myself. And that's why, as I said, I'd like to wait and see what the town attorney has, because I think there are some conflicts between how it's written and what's on there. And also, I myself just wanted to understand what the purpose of this was. In other words, what we would be doing is putting up large billboards on 495, which could be advertising a restaurant in Marlborough, in other words.
Yes.
Yes.
And what benefit is that to our town?
So Hazel, the benefit to the community in the past for Route 9, the signs on Route 9, has been determined by the fee that is paid to the community by Clear Channel, the sign operator. That's the definition of public benefit. It's not defined that way here. It says that the selectmen, through their development agreement, shall determine if there's public benefit.
And how much did you say it was going to cost? How much? I mean, they give us a flat fee, don't they?
Yes, $25,000 a year.
But that would likely be higher on these signs.
Which is nothing.
Mark, may I answer that question?
Go ahead, Fred.
So presently, the billboard signs, we get $10,000 per face. So if it's double face, the town gets $20,000. That's pretty standard on the agreements we have in place. Publicly, Clear Channel said during your meetings initially, and I don't know, we have it documented somewhere, I would hope, that they're claiming that the 495 billboards, they're willing to pay $50,000 a face. I'm not sure why they're willing to do that, but they've come out.
More exposure, I assume.
So there would be an added benefit to get 50 grand a face on those.
All right, well, as I said, I'll wait.
So, and then the other,
I am not,
Hazel,
frankly, I'm not in favor of this.
the other public benefit, Hazel, is the community service. I think, what is it, 10% of their, I could be wrong on the percentage, but 10% of their display needs to be committed to community service, Amber, not just Amber Alerts, but announcements of
town meeting, announcements of voting, announcements of
But what benefit is that?
turkey trot.
Yeah, but what benefit is that to people driving up and down 495? That's where I'm having a problem, quite frankly.
Well, a lot of people coming up 495 are getting off and coming into Westborough.
Well, I can tell you the Arts and Common Festival is a regional thing, and they want people there from surrounding
But that's
communities.
once a year. Okay, I mean, I can argue about it. I don't see the point of this. But anyway, because I think putting up a large billboard on 495 is not the way to go. But I'll wait and continue later.
All right. Any other questions before I get through mine? All right. I wanted to know, and I'm not clear whether it's written somewhere else in the bylaws, but what type of notification is required with this? Is it just notifying abutters, or is there a distance notification requirement?
So since it's a zoning bylaw, it's a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The advertising requirements of 40A would be in place, which is 300 feet from any abutter. So if you had a property lying within 300 feet, you're required to receive certified mail. The ZBA can increase that. I mean, this bylaw does say any residential property within 500 feet must be at least 500 feet. They may increase that to 500. but right now, notice would be required under the State Zoning Act, the same as on any other special permit.
Okay. Next question I had was on section 3342, section D. Existing off-premises, non-digital or non-electric billboards in other districts wishing to convert to digital format shall comply with the requirements of section 3340. I had two questions on this. First of all, is section 3340 adequate, or is it section 3340 through 3340, whatever we're up to, 47? Because 3340 is a pretty short section.
So 3340 is the controlling section. All of the others are subsections. So anything that has 334 in front of it would apply. So it's technically all the way to the end of the section, 3347.
Okay. As long as we're sure of that, I don't want somebody claiming that, you know, that they can vary from the other requirements of this change. The other one, if we're, you know, you're proposing in this bylaw change to allow an existing billboard anywhere in town to change to a digital format. I don't know, again, with the requirements of this section, I think the size of those billboards need to be under 680 feet. I'm just not clear, does this allow somebody with a 300 square foot sign or a 200 square foot sign to go to a larger size?
I'll let the building commissioner answer that.
Mark, the intent is to allow the existing sign to convert. So where it's a special permit, the ZBA, I suppose, could allow some leniency there, but I doubt they would. It would be based on what the existing sign is now.
Yeah, so I would support language that would require it to be the same size or smaller. I don't, you know, I don't necessarily think we should be allowing to, you know, again, if the entire purpose of putting this special permit granting authority into the ZBA's hands was for strict interpretation of the bylaw. Well, now we're taking strict interpretation out of it and we're leaving some discretion. You know, I don't necessarily agree with allowing existing signs to become larger through this.
Mark, I will
bylaw.
tell you that the 5 existing signs are all at least as large as the digital, having driven the road a number of times to look at that during this process.
Yeah, so have we
And
defined?
two or three
do
of
we have
them
a,
are
go ahead, Jim,
500
sorry.
feet. I'm sorry, Mark.
No, I
just want to
interrupted you. Go ahead.
And I wanted to say several of them are within 500 feet of residential. So several of them aren't going to be able to do it anyway, if any. But just wanted to stress that existing sizes are at least as large as the digital billboards in existence. Just to comment on that.
Well, so Mark, to follow back with that, I would suggest that we could just, Jim could just add a sentence in there stating that no pre-existing non-conforming digital billboard, or I'm sorry, billboard can be increased in size. Just,
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, that would satisfy me. I just think it should be spelled out. I also wonder if we should have, and I don't know if we do, but do we have a definition of billboard? Or is it potential that somebody could claim they have a billboard that's not meant to be a billboard?
I think we do have a definite, billboard is meant to be off-premise advertising. I do believe somewhere in either this bylaw or in our definitions, we have that. But I'd have to find that for you, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't have a situation where somebody is claiming they have a billboard that we weren't anticipating to cover it under this.
Doesn't the first sentence in
Yeah,
section
yeah.
3340 spell it out right there?
Yes, it does, Tim.
Off-premise signs, billboards or signs whose content does not relate exclusively to the premises on which they are located or to products, accommodations, services, or activities on those premises shall not be permitted.
That,
And the conversion would condition itself on that section.
Yep.
Great.
Someone
Thanks for,
sought to
thanks
do
for pointing
something.
that out, Tim.
All right.
Sure. Then my next question on the 500-foot radius of the proposed location, does that include residential uses in other towns?
That's a good question, Mark. I don't know if we contemplated that. I guess.
We're talking about 495 and the
Right.
Pike, so a lot of those lots are really close to other towns. I want to be a good neighbor on this. I don't want somebody putting up a
We
75
said residential
that.
uses, Mark.
I'm
They're
sorry,
going to
what?
have to show, I'm sorry. Through you, Mark, the bylaw is written, it says residential uses. It doesn't
Residential
make a
purpose.
distinction between towns or town boundaries. So when the permit is applied for, they're going to have to show an arc. As a matter of fact, if you look at the section, it's section 3343, number 2. So it's on the second
Yeah.
page of the bylaw. It says demonstrate that no residentially zoned property or pre-existing non-conforming property or other property used for residential purposes, excluding hotels or motels, is within 500-foot radius of the proposed location. So they'll have to draw a circle around the location of the map.
regardless of the location.
As long as we're, again, I just want to be a good neighbor on this. So I don't really want a 75-foot sign springing up next to a house in Southborough. I don't think that's being a good neighbor. So
Yeah, this
as
would
long as
cover
you
that.
feel like it's covered, then we're fine.
I can ask council if he thinks that would cover municipalities outside of Westborough. I can see someone arguing, well, this is a Westborough bylaw. It doesn't relate to properties in Southborough, say, or Hopkinton, let's say. So yeah, that's a good question. I'll ask council if this refers to all residential uses regardless of municipality.
Jim, can we just add for uses and for use for residential purposes in Westborough or abutting towns?
Sure, let me think if maybe
I
we
mean-
could add that language.
Okay, and then my last, I guess, comment was on 3345. I felt like this was somewhat vague, and I don't know if we want to be more explicit as far as requiring a binding contract, an annual review of the terms of the contract, so that the select board has the authority to request more money as time goes on. As 100 years from now, the terms of a special permit may not be quite as much to the public benefit as it is now, i.e. inflation. So I don't know if, again, it's a comment. I'd be interested to see the town council's review of this section, but I think this could have maybe a little more explicit language as to what that development agreement should contain.
I think, Mark, we tried to leave it to the select board in that, by not putting it too specifically, so they could actually adopt a current time, so they could choose a 1-year renewal with cost of living increases. I mean, they're going to have the ability to negotiate this pretty clearly based on what they feel is in the best interest of the town. So we were actually careful not to put too many restrictions so that they could indeed react to the current circumstances and environment. And so that was the thought there.
Yeah, I think, again, I see I agree that this, I got that sense from it, but I'm just not sure how, in practice, whether we need something a little more. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'll be curious to see what the town council says. So that was
Okay.
really just a comment on it. I didn't have anything else. So anything else from the board on this bylaw? We'll have a public hearing on the 8th, Jim?
Yes.
I still would like to know, we have a limited stretch of property that we're talking about on both 684 and probably the Mass Pike, whatever. I would still like to know how many signs could go up in that area. I mean, and practically, I want to know, I would really like to know if it turns out this is going to be one sign for the benefit of one person, then, you know, I think we're in trouble on that aspect of it. But I really wish someone would tell me, because it's a limited space and they have to be able to see them, so that there are certain constraints because of the topography of the road that are going to restrict where these can go. And so I just really would like to know. I wish someone would look at that and be able to tell me practically where these can go.
Well, I think I understand your point there, Hazel, but I think some of it may depend on where the first one goes. So,
That's right.
you know,
Right.
that could dictate where the other ones go. So if you're looking for a maximum build out on it, I don't know. I'm not really clear on how to produce that, but maybe someone else has a
So
method to do that.
just so you know, Hazel, like, I mean, you and I can sit down and look at the map, but I think that if Mark is right, it depends where the first one goes. If you go up and down 495 north-south, if the first one is at the southernmost extremity of the extent of frontage along 495, you're probably going to be able to get another one in. If the first one goes somewhere along the middle of that stretch, now they affect 1,000 feet in both directions. So you're going to limit the possibilities of additional signage.
No,
Where you put the first pin in the paper
right.
is going to determine where future signs can go.
I understand that, but I really think that the topography and the way the land sits and the possibility of being able to where it's going to put will make a difference as to where you put the first one or where you put the second one. So, you know, I just don't want to be in a situation where it turns out that because of the topography of the land and the way it's set up, that realistically only one can go up there and that's it. And then I just think that, you know, to benefit one landowner to do a zoning change, I think is inequitable. So I just don't feel that I understand this that well. And I've driven up and down that many times. And, you know, there are problems with getting off and going north onto Route 9 as it is.
Okay. I'm not sure what other comments we can make on that, or if anybody has an idea of how to identify. I guess it would be maximum build out. I'm not sure where to go with that.
I mean, that's a question that certainly I would think would be raised by the public when they're either at the public hearing or at the town meeting, because they're going to want to know what they're talking about as to the number of billboards that can be put there and how many.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting to see what the I would say worst case scenario would be. How many, like, where are we going to end up with 5 of these at worst case, or
Or is it impractical because as far as who owns the land? I mean, there are a number of things that come into that, or they don't have the proper frontage. So, you know, as I said, I think if I remember the public, that's the first question I would ask is, how many billboards are we talking about? Where are they going to go? And what are they going to advertise?
Okay. Well, again, I'm not sure how to identify that. Maybe Fred and Jim can put their heads together and see if there's a way to nail that down for the public hearing.
Sure.
All
There's
right.
clearly some areas where it can't go that are near residential along Washington that are easy to identify as not being available. And so what that's going to do is on either side of it, it's going to limit the length that you could have 1,000 feet from one side or another. So it's going to be very easy to identify where one can't go. And then that might show us what's left and give us a little bit of idea of within reason what's reasonable. I can't, to your first point, Mark, obviously if somebody in any of those areas puts something down, that will impact the remainder. But we can take a fresh look at the map and see what we think.
Yeah, I mean, I understand Hazel's point about equity. I don't necessarily want to create, something that's advantageous to just one owner. But if we create a zone that is I guess advantageous may not be the right word, but if we create a zone where several landowners have equal opportunity from the outset, well, let the race begin. And then if one of them puts one up and it affects the other's rights to put one up, I'm not sure that's our concern.
I agree with
we
that.
Just want to protect the public, not, I don't know. I got to think about that because I understand Hazel's point. And I'm not really sure I'm ready to comment further on that. So let's, I'm going to stop thinking out loud and move on unless somebody else has comments. All right, why don't we move on to the next subject and we can discuss this further at the public hearing on February 8th.
Can I just request that the members of the board please take a good look at the proposed bylaw and send me any comments in writing. I have two from this evening, which I think are easily incorporated. One has to do with not increasing the size of digital or non-digital billboards, and the other is making sure that the 500-foot radius from residential properties includes properties in other municipalities. I think those are two easy additions to the bylaw.
Great.
Okay, I'll go through my notes and send you anything else I have, but I think we're ready to move to the next agenda item. So the next agenda item is a discussion of the Housing Choice Act. And I'm going to ask Jim to kind of summarize it, and I'll probably chime in with, Fred and Jim and I attended a webinar last week that gave us some good information. There's draft guidelines out about this that were circulated. There's a frequently asked questions, but there's no final guidelines yet, so we may see some changes, but we wanted to get in front of this. So Jim, why don't you summarize what's before us, and again, I'll chime in later with any comments.
Sure, thank you. So just to kind of set the stage here, just so you know, to frame the question, the state, through the new housing choice legislation, which was passed last April, passed into law, requires that municipalities who are host communities for any MBTA station, whether it's the rapid transit, commuter rail, or bus station, make a provision for affordable housing, or affordable housing as we know it, within a half mile of their MBTA station or elsewhere in the community that would allow a density of up to 1,000 units, 1,200 units within the community, that would also include smart growth principles, sustainability principles, which would mean mass transit to a commuter rail station, and that could be a bus or a van pool, much like what Westborough has in VIA and the senior shuttle. The legislation requires that municipalities adopt zoning that allows a density of up to 15 units per acre by right. And that, let me just read from it so that I don't miss anything, and that there are no age restrictions on that type of housing, and that they are suitable for families with children. Now, currently, where Westborough stands is we do have transit-oriented zoning, as you know, out by the MBTA station. It is the other thing that the legislation requires is that you have a minimum of 50 acres dedicated to this by right housing production. We currently have over 60 acres of land in our transit-oriented village. However, the zoning in that district does not allow a density greater than 14 units per acre, and it is not by right. It is by special permit. And in order to avail yourself to the density of up to 14 units per acre, you must purchase property which is called the sending property, and the planning board attaches a value to the density in the sending property, which must be in the single family residential district, and transfers that density to the receiving property, which is in the transit-oriented village. That's where the projects that we know as Westborough Village and Village Commons came from. Westborough Village has a density of up to 14 units per acre. They built it at 12 units per acre, and Village Commons has a density of 10 units per acre, and they built it at that. I'm sorry, 5 units per acre, and they built it at that. So one thing that we could do, and I'm not suggesting that we do this, is simply change our transit-oriented zoning to 15 units instead of 14, and drop the requirement for special permit and allow it by right. However, I think that based on your master plan and the goals of your master plan, you want to promote affordable housing in the downtown. So I think we should look to create a sustainable multifamily district in the downtown that allows more than 15 units per acre and requires a provision for affordable housing at least at 20% and more, I would say more if possible, in the downtown, and identify acres and parcels that we would allow in that district in the downtown, and apply for that through the state, keeping our current TOV intact, not increasing the density and not giving up the transfer of development rights. The one thing that we do need to do before I turn it back to Mark is we need to give an update to the state by May 2nd as to where our town stands currently. And what we would do is we would explain our current transit-oriented village, the fact that we have created approximately 500 units there under our current zoning, and that zoning, the quantity of that zoning and the qualifications of that zoning, meaning by right 14 units per acre, transit-oriented sending and receiving parcels. So we would have to explain to them what we've done currently and then propose what we would like to do in the future. I think that's an easy lift for us because we have that zoning in place currently. And I would respectfully request that we ask for credit for every one of the units that we have created in the past in that district. Back to you, Mark.
So I'm not sure if anybody has questions on what Jim commented on. I think there's, I've thought a lot about this, and I just want to hear from the board first and then see what direction we want to go. But Jim, could you?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, you answered the question that was top of mind. We don't have to find 50 acres downtown, right? I mean, so the key is, you're likely to get credit for what we've done, and then we simply have got to figure out what would close the gap, and that's what you're thinking.
Yeah. So Jim Ball, the guidelines say that of the new, whatever the new district size is, 50% of it needs to be within half a mile. So you could take the 34 acres that Westborough Village is on, some of the other smaller lots. I think that the problem with the TOV right now is that there's a couple of big lots. There's a 23 acre lot Now it's got a commercial building on it, but a 23-acre lot at 15 units an acre, I think is like 350 units. And I don't think the town could absorb another 300 plus, I think, Westborough Village is 276 units, but the town really felt that when it was built. The impact on the schools in particular was pretty strenuous.
So you
So
don't
I
have the
think
sewer capacity either, right?
well, yeah, the water, sewer, and everything else is impacted. Emergency services. I mean, there's a lot of impact that we don't want to see all at once. Like, I think the idea is to identify smaller lots. At least my concept of this is to identify smaller lots. So, it's a lot harder to develop 20, quarter-acre lots all at once than it is to identify, to develop a 5-acre lot. You only need one developer on a 5-acre lot, but you need 20 developers on a quarter-acre lot. So the other thing is, when you look at this, the smart growth principles that they're referring to, for one, smart growth principle was the sustainable development principle was to concentrate development in mixed uses and to support the revitalization of city and town centers and neighborhoods by promoting development that is compact, conserves land, protects historic resources, and integrates uses. I feel like that principle is somewhat in line with what we discussed in the master plan. And I think that's where we would need to go. So, without I could get down into the nitty gritty of everything, but, that I've thought of, but I don't want to spend another hour on this tonight. I think that the smart thing for us to do is to create some type of subcommittee to work with Jim and Fred on, a draft bylaw that would conform with the guidelines as we know them, because at some point we'll have to submit a draft bylaw or a bylaw to DHCD for their approval to show that we're in compliance with this. And I don't think I don't think it's too soon to get started on that.
Mark, you said something about zoning change. As far as I thought you said, you're talking about the downtown as far as multi-family type housing. Did you?
Yeah, I think that's where we need to some of the requirements of this bylaw. If you look at the state's requirements, they're going to require that 15% that the town create a zone that could support 1,250 multifamily units. Now, we already have 276 in the Westborough Village. We have, 14 more. But where would we want a lot more multifamily units? Do we want them over by the train station or do we want them downtown?
Well, where
On
can
the
they
final
go?
lot, we sure don't want 1,000.
Yeah. And the other advantage to downtown is the point I made earlier about you have a bunch of smaller lots that would take much more time to redevelop than one big lot. Lisa, go ahead.
I just have a question. I know you guys are doing this. It's, to kind of put it down on paper and it's in place. What happens if at the end of this year or next year, when I'm finally finished with my comprehensive wastewater management plan and we figure out we don't have any more, we're hoping to gain some more capacity in the multifamily sector. But what happens if we find out we just don't have any spares to put over to that category?
So the guidelines, and that might be a good question for us to go back to DHC. The guidelines don't address, an
Infrastructure.
infrastructure shortage like that. So if we have a moratorium, we could pass zoning that would allow it, but they would have to come up with private sewage options. And
Yep.
and that may preclude some of these smaller lots. But I think I'm okay with that. There's a lot of considerations, and that was one of the ones that I identified was, the infrastructure needs for this type of development. Are we going to require sustainable building principles? Are we going to require mixed use, commercial residential, which is allowed? What is our affordability requirement going to be? I could go on and on. Are we going to allow waivers for small lots? So if we have a 20% affordable requirement on a 50-unit building, well, if somebody wants to convert a tenth of an acre to a 4-unit building, are we going to make them put in affordable component? Are we going to require, streetscape improvements to go, or a contribution to a capital fund? Train on emergency services. Are we going to require design review, historical preservation review? There's a lot of things we need to go through and figure out. Are we going to require parking? Downtown, we might not have a parking requirement. So I don't know. Or even over by the train station, we might not have a parking requirement, because the idea is, again, walkability is something that the state wants to encourage. So, I think we have a lot of open questions on this, and I think we really need to start formulating, what direction we want to go with this, and maybe even bringing in a select board member to that committee to get their input. I don't know how you guys feel about identifying a couple members to start working on this or not.
Jim has comments.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't see you, Jim. Go ahead.
Thank you. So one thing I just want to point out is that the number is staggering when you think that if you had 15 units per acre and you need to have at least 50 acres, that's 750 units at a minimum. You have to show that you can provide for 750. Now, your zoning has to provide for it. Doesn't mean it has to get built. Lisa pointed out early, what happens if the wastewater management plan doesn't have additional capacity? Well, the fallback, as Mark noted, would be that they can provide their own on-site wastewater treatment, septic perk. The legislation doesn't require you actually build it. It requires that you show a provision for it. So we could be on a moratorium for years before anything is built on sewer if the management plan doesn't show we have the capacity. So I just want you to know that you shouldn't freak out. So that should give you an opportunity to breathe and create the best district you can. Be thinking about what's the best for the town and not just what's necessary to satisfy what the state's looking for.
Yeah, so just to clarify though, because we are a commuter rail community, we have to create a district that can support 15% of our current housing stock. So that 750 number is not really the number. The number for Westborough is 1,250, that we have to create a district that could by right, build 1,250 units. Now, that if something's already built on at a lower density than that, that's okay, right? It doesn't mean that we don't comply with the 1,250. We have to create, a district that by right, they would be able to build 1,200 units. So that's a complex issue because where do we want, where would we want to allow this by right? That's really the issue. We're not going to allow, we're not going to go up to Computer Drive and say you can build 1,250 residential units by right, because we might get that tomorrow. Some of those big office buildings, and they might just convert them, right? Do we want to, we need to be very careful about where we allow these.
Basically, yeah, you have to be real careful because it'll blow up the town.
Yeah, but again, I get back to the point. It needs to be small lots, Jim. If you look at, let's take the 25 West Main Street building, right? Which I think is a good model for us. It's a 4-story mixed-use building. It's got 28 residential units and a storefront commercial on the first floor. That's a half an acre lot, right? That's 50 units an acre. I'm actually okay with that. If you took the Shell gas station, which is a half an acre lot, and put up 30 units or 40 units of residential overlooking Bay State Green, I'd rather have that than a gas station there with a first floor commercial unit, right? I mean, isn't that kind of in line with what the master plan is suggesting for revitalization? If you took the lot where the kennel was, well, not where the daycare was, right? Where the cell phone towers is, 25 Brigham, right?
Yep.
That's 1.3 acres. If you, built that out with a, 40 unit, I mean, again, I don't necessarily like the idea of 40 units going in, but to revitalize downtown, you've got to make those lots valuable enough for people to want to build on them. And the way to do that is to allow greater density. On the other hand, if you take 125 Fisher, where the Neotech building is, which is in our current TOV, and it's a 23-acre site, I'm not sure that a developer wouldn't tear down that building and put up 350 residential units. And I don't think that's what we want.
They would do it in a second.
Right. Well, it just sold for 20 million. So is it worth $20 million to
Demo it.
a residential developer? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the math behind that, but I'd certainly be scared if somebody wanted to put up 350 units over there. So bigger, we've got it. Like, even
if you look at Pulte and the Lake, Mark, right, for what they paid and what they're spending to build 700 units, someone probably would do it for that size lot.
Right. But even when we look at downtown, we have to be careful. Like, we can't, we don't want to necessarily include, the downtown crossing lot. That's a huge lot. That might be way more units than we want. We need to go through and identify where we would want, more multifamily development. And, I think some of the small lots might benefit from this. I don't know if you remember with that guy that came in with the D-Pod proposal on what's the
Tufts Machine.
What's that?
Tufts
No,
Machine.
not Tufts Machine, the small one
Right
there.
over by Brigham Street.
Yeah, behind Brigham Street. What's
Yeah,
and he wanted to put up
right. A small apartment
a
building.
6-unit building,
right.
and the D-Pod
On Cottage.
requires
Yeah.
On Cottage Street.
right on Cottage Street, and the D-Pod requires affordability and a commercial unit, and that just made it unfeasible for him to redevelop that. Well, now we've got an underperforming lot that doesn't bring in a lot of tax revenue, that doesn't have a very
Attractive building.
I would like to encourage something to be done there.
Yeah,
you
but
can,
Mark, what do we do about the thing that I think we have to look at also is the effect on our schools. So this
my God, yeah.
particular, this particular
but I am thinking of that, Hazel, right?
legislation.
Like, if you take that 23-acre lot and develop with 345 units, you're going to see 345 townhouses, right?
Well,
2 and 3 bedroom townhouses, because
Yeah,
we can't
Need
limit
another
this.
school next door.
But if
Right.
you go downtown and tell somebody, on a half an acre lot that they can put up 28 units, but it has to be 4 stories. They physically won't be able to make the units bigger than, 700-800 square feet.
Right, but wasn't there some language in that particular requirement by the state that had to do with families?
Sure, it says we can't limit the number of families, but if we encourage developers to put up buildings that will encourage them to, if you allow them to do more units on the same footprint, right?
And do 1-bedroom
You
units?
build one bedroom.
Example, I looked at this
Yeah.
example, right? Right now, I don't know if you're familiar with this building. It's 30 West Main Street, which is right. I think there was an insurance agency in there, and it's right next to Town Hall, pretty much.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That
It's next to
let's
phase
actually,
4.
here's even a better example, right? 17 East Main Street, which is Alexander, Aronson and Finning, right next to
The American
Shell
block.
Station, right? That's got 7 commercial units upstairs in the building. 6 of them are upstairs, right? It's 5,000 square feet of floor. If you were to convert that to to residential, and you said that they can only put in, 4 units, well, you end up with 4 3,000 square foot units. But if you allow them to put in, 40 units, you end up with 600 or 800 square foot units.
Well, the other thing is we wouldn't, I assume with the moratorium on the septic, we'd run into real problems as far as the septics go on that, wouldn't we, Lisa?
Well, the sewer moratorium is going to help us slow down any
Right.
progress. And I think even if we come up with capacity, we need to identify where that capacity is best used. Like we don't want to
Yeah,
use it on new
I agree.
residential subdivisions.
yep, I agree too.
But I'll give you an example, like back to 30 West Main Street, right? That's a 4-story building with 3 residential units right now. It's a grandfathered building, so they couldn't change it. They couldn't make the units smaller, but each of those 3 residential units is over like 2,400 square feet, right? But if you let them reconfigure that and
The 3,800 per floor.
If you allow them to take the 2,400 and go to 3 800 square foot units, you'd actually get less kids out of that.
And there has been interest in that. So,
The 1-bedroom affordable units would be actually fairly popular in downtown in particular.
Right, you keep an affordability component, you keep you make them, you make them contribute to some type of capital fund so that we can improve the streetscape, get the sidewalks, maybe put the streetlights underground on all the way down East Main, which would help things look nicer, and there's a lot of streetscape improvements that would help, beautify downtown. I mean, I think it's beautiful, but it can always get better. I don't know. There's a lot to think about. I didn't really want to get this into it. I wanted to really propose that we put a couple members on this task and come up with a specific proposal. I would certainly like to do that. If there's more than 2 of us interested in doing that, then we can have some kind of vote. But I'd love to hear what you think. Is anybody else willing to work on that?
Mark, it's all you.
All right. That's fine. I'll work with Jim and Fred, and I may reach out to the select board to see if they want to, assign somebody to participate in this, and we'll put together a working group and come up with some type of draft that would, again, we won't know if it complies until we actually submit it. But, I think we need to get started working on it, because if we don't do this, we won't be eligible for grant money on anything, and that's really the danger we run if we don't do this. Jim Robbins, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just as a couple things to keep in mind, there's a public comment period, which lasts it was opened at the end of December. It closes March 31st. So the regulations, even though they've been promulgated, have not been enacted yet by the state. They'll be enacted at the end of March 31st, when they've had an opportunity to review all public comments. I mean, there'll be some comments from municipalities who are not necessarily MBTA communities, but are abutting MBTA communities, who are also required to produce up to 10 units per acre. I think they will have comments because they probably don't have the infrastructure to support sustainable development. But there'll be communities like Westborough that will have imaginative ways that they can make this legislation work, but not necessarily within half a mile of the commuter rail station, much like we're proposing. So that March 31st date is important to us to get our ideas in, so that they might change the legislation to give communities more latitude, which would be good for us. That's number one to think about. The comment about us not receiving grant money like the MassWorks program or the TIP program, for example, is real if we don't answer the questionnaire by May 2nd, which we will do. So I don't think we'll be harmed by that. In the long run, at the end of 2023, if we don't comply with creating additional housing within a half mile of the train station or in some other area that they accept, then that would affect you at the end of 2023.
Mark,
So
I
you
mean,
have a couple dates to keep in mind. I just want you to keep those dates in mind. It was in my memo that I sent.
yeah,
So
Jim,
Hazel,
is
go
that,
ahead.
is it, do we have to just to have the zoning in place? We don't have to have the things built or anything. It's just the
No.
zoning.
Oh my God.
No, there's no
That's-
requirement to build anything. There's
That's
only a
what I thought.
requirement.
I just wanted to clarify because Jim said,
So just to get back to one of the interesting facets of this is that we can create sub-districts. So we could have a district over by the train station, like Westborough Village, that's 12 acres. 12 units an acre, right? Now that's not 15 units, which is the requirement, but we can offset that somewhere else. So let's say we have 10 acres over, let's say we have 25 acres over by the train station at 12 units an acre. If we have 25 units somewhere, or 25 acres somewhere else at 18 units per acre, well, that averages out to the 15 units an acre, which is, so we don't have to have
You don't need a new
uniform
50
number.
acres, Mark. In other words, you're going to get some credit, some significant credit for what's already there.
It's not about what's already there. It's about what could be there under by right zoning. So if you take out what's there altogether, you could go to Fountainhead and zone that, 12 units an acre, and they would only give us credit for, I think Fountainhead's like 6 acres. They'd only give us credit for 72 units, even though there's 500 plus units there, right? That wouldn't help us.
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with what's there. It's what could be there under by right zoning. So when you take Westborough Village,
Because it's not by right, it doesn't count.
yeah, we're really just looking at identifying lots that either, that will not be, we don't want to put a bunch of big lots into this zoning because those are the ones where we risk the biggest impact.
Yeah.
That's it. We've got to come up with all this acreage with smaller lots, put some requirements in, like they won't let us put 100% affordable requirement, right? Like you'd think that's what the state wants, but they don't.
But they know it won't get done.
because they know it won't get done. So they want reasonable requirements. So a reasonable requirement might be 20% affordable. A reasonable requirement might be first floor retail, right? Those are reasonable requirements that we might want to incorporate in this that would help slow down the pace of this so that it's not so
Impactful.
sudden, right? And that's really what we need to focus our efforts on in crafting this, that, if it does happen, where would we be okay with it happening? And then how can we slow it down so it doesn't impact the town all at once? And I think we can do that and still keep with the ideas of the master plan, which is to revitalize downtown and encourage walkability downtown, create a village atmosphere downtown. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I don't want to spend everyone's time because I could go on and on. But I'd like to get this working group together, and we'll come up with something a little more concrete.
Mark, I'd certainly work on it with you for the next month too, but then I'm off. I don't know who. I know there's someone running for my seat, so I don't know if that might be who won't have any current assignments. So it may be something to consider.
Well, Jim, even when you're off, I'd love to hear your input on stuff, and I hope you stay
happy to do that.
Stay in touch with us, and it's the same way Lester still comes and bends our ear now and then. So
absolutely.
Mark, and I definitely will assist if you need my help.
Okay. Well, why don't we take that? I'll work with Jim, and we'll put out some times and see whether Pete or Jim Ball can attend. But I'll work with Jim Robbins and Fred on maybe a weekly meeting. I don't know their schedules, and I don't want to specify anything now. But we'll see what we can. And I think Patrick Welch from the Board of Selectmen is the planning board liaison. I'll ask him if he's willing to do that, or if he can see if anyone else on the board on the select board. Sorry, I'm gonna misspeak that for years. So anyway, so what other thoughts? Any other questions on that? All right, I think the last thing we had on the agenda, unless I'm missing something, was minutes. Jim Ball, I'll let you.
Sure, Mark. We just had the executive session minutes from the November 23rd joint meeting with the select board, which I believe you all received from Kristen. Any questions or comments on those? They look good to me. I would entertain a motion to accept and approve those minutes then.
So moved.
I'll second that. Mark, you want to do the roll call, or would you like me?
Sure. You go ahead, actually, Jim.
All right. Mark Silverberg.
I vote yes.
Pete Bouchard.
Bouchard, yes.
Hazel Norris.
Yes, to approve.
And Tim Kaler.
Kaler to approve.
And I approve as well.
All right, that's 5-0 to approve. Any other business, Jim Robbins?
No further business. I just want to let you know about this working group. Mark, send me an email, and I can keep the entire board in the loop on this, and keep them in the loop on our progress. If we meet in person or by Zoom, we can have no more than 2 members, because we can't violate the open meeting law. That doesn't mean that people can't come in and out. So for example, the first meeting, if it were you and Jim Ball, that would be great. The next meeting might be Pete and you. It's just as long as I don't have more than 2 people present at any one time.
Understood.
Okay.
Mark, I just wanted to ask Jim about, we got a note, I think last month, about somebody wanted to move mailboxes.
Yeah, that's not ready, Hazel. That'll be on
Okay.
next meeting. It's, I think, a pretty simple issue, but
It
they're
looked
not
like
ready.
it, but it sort of dropped off, and I wondered what had happened.
Yeah, we took
Yes,
that
the
off.
engineer was not ready. He wanted to come back with a landscape plan to screen the mailboxes from the abutters.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Any other business? Kristen, anything? All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Any discussion? All those in favor, Hazel Nurse,
yes.
Peter Bouchard,
Bouchard, yes.
Jim Ball,
Yes.
Tim Kaler,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. That's 5-0 to adjourn. Thank you, guys. Have a
Have a
good
good
night.
night, everybody.
Night.
Stay warm.
Good night.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.